If you're a health or a life coach who wants to make 2026 your best year in business yet, then you don't want to miss this episode of the show. Today, I'm going to take you through a guided workshop that is going to help you plan for your business for 2026. Let's dive in. Hi there, welcome to the Wholehearted Business Show. I'm Laura. I help heart-centered and highly sensitive health and life coaches get more clients, grow the business and live the best lives while they do it. And today's show is a guided workshop that is going to help you plan for 2026. If you are wanting to grow your business, if you're wanting to have more success, whatever that looks like for you, if you want to get clearer on what your plans are going to be for next year, then this is the episode to stay tuned to. The first thing that I would love for you to do is to go and download the workbook that accompanies this guided workshop. If you go to wholeheartedlylaura.com/2026-planning, you'll be able to download the workbook that goes along with this episode of the show. So I'm going to guide you through all of the questions that we have in the workbook. And if you download the workbook, you can sit and you can either type in on Google Docs or you can print it out and just write in. It's totally up to you how you want to use it. But it's really going to help you get clear on what your plans are for 2026, as well as review 2025. If you find this planning workshop helpful and you want to take it a step further, then I'd love for you to check out my planning templates for coaches. And actually, planning templates for coaches is probably not quite enough of a word for what it is. So basically, I have a bunch of templates, a bunch of resources that you can use in Notion. And this will create basically like a whole kind of hub for your business. So if you want to take the plans that we create today and actually get really organized and actually have somewhere where everything lives, where your business HQ is, all of that kind of stuff, then do check out the planning templates for coaches, because that is going to help you do that. The link is in the description. So like I say, I'm going to run this episode of the show like an actual guided workshop. Listen to the questions, again, have the workbook handy, and then just pause me as we go through each of the questions. And by the end of it, you will have an amazing plan for 2026. I absolutely love this episode of the show. We've done this now, I think, like ever since I started the show. I think this is the third planning show that we've done, and planning is one of my favorite things. I highly encourage you as well, if you have the opportunity to do so, is to make this a little bit of a ritual. You know, light a candle. I've got my scented candle on the go. Light a candle, you know, get some snacks in, like make it a ritual, make it a really wonderful space to be in, to envisage what you want to have happen in 2026. It's such a wonderful thing to do. So if that calls to you, you know, do that. I'm going to be doing that at some point in December. I will like put a day out in my diary and I will just sit and make my environment really beautiful. I will have like big notepads, you know, all that kind of thing. And yeah, if you've got the opportunity to do that, I would definitely encourage you to do that too. So we're going to start off by closing out 2025. We're really going to review everything that you've had going on in 2025 so that you can learn from whatever's happened and, you know, plan what you want to carry forward into 2026. So the first question is, if you went through this planning process for 2025, if you did the workshop last year, or if you did someone else's kind of planning process, you know, get those plans out and review them. That's the first thing to do, is actually look at, you know, what was in my plan? How often did I look at the plan? Did I achieve the things in that plan? If I didn't achieve those things, why not? Just kind of do that review of the annual plan that you may have made last year, if you have that. If you haven't, then just feel free to skip this question. The next question is, what are you proud of that you've achieved, that you've done, the attitude that you've taken, you know, anything that you feel proud of that has happened in 2025. And then we're going to move on and think about, what lessons have you learned in 2025? Can you think of anything in particular that has happened this year that you feel that was a big lesson for me that I've taken on? Make a note of that now. And then thinking about your life and business in general, was there anything that felt overwhelming, that felt kind of sticky, that felt where you were hitting some resistance? Anything that came up, any challenges that particularly came up, you know, make a note of those now, because it's really good to reflect on the things that have been difficult or challenging. And alongside this, did you experience any kind of time or energy sucks? You know, anything that was kind of like leeching off you, anything that just didn't feel good? You know, this is the point in time to get anything that's negative that's happened in 2025. Let's just get it all out. Let's just get that down on paper so we can move on. And then the follow-up question to that is, what needs to change going forward? So based on these less than stellar experiences that you might have had, the challenges, the things that have been difficult, what can you change to make things different, to have another story when you go into 2026? What needs to change for moving forward? And now we're going to move on to some more kind of tangible, specific questions for 2025. What services and products did you sell in your coaching business in 2025? it can just be really helpful to get these things listed out so that you can really see the things that you had available and how things went. And then reflecting on those things that you were selling, what were the most successful? And, in terms of success, we might want to look at that from an income point of view, but we also might want to look at that from how fun was this to deliver and sell? How in alignment did this feel to have this in place? So think of it from that point of view as well, but think about the things that you were selling and think about what was the most successful. And then the next question is a bit of a metrics check-in. So your metrics are basically your cold, hard numbers that you have in your business that you want to track and measure that will reveal where you are progressing or not progressing. So do have a bit of a metrics check-in for 2025, like, how many people are on your email list? What kind of views are your website getting? What are your income numbers? Things like that. What are your expenses? Any numbers that you need to keep a track of to measure progress. Now's a really good time to check in with those. So you might want to take a snapshot right now. You might want to think about what it's going to be at the end of the year and actually come back to this and take a snapshot then. But also as part of your metrics, don't forget to think about like the softer metrics as well. How much fun have you had? Have you had more time to live your life this year? Have you had more opportunities to do things that are fun because your business has enabled you to do that? Really think outside the box, as well as like those very, kind of like numbery metrics. Think about other things too. And then thinking about 2025, what are you really grateful for from this year? What experiences, what things have come into your life? What relationships, what parts of your business do you feel really grateful for in 2025? It's always a lovely thing to kind of really think about what has brought us joy, what is making us happy, what has been a good thing. Sometimes even negative things, because they've given us a lesson, can be things to be grateful for. And what did you love the most about your business in 2025? Can you think about what your business has enabled you to do? What's been most enjoyable about it? What have you really loved, enjoyed, found satisfying about your business in 2025? And then what do we need to let go and leave in 2025? So the numerology of 2025 has very much been about endings. It's a 9-year. So if anyone who has any knowledge of numerology, a 9-year is all about things ending, basically. And that can feel really, really difficult, but it's about letting things go. It's about allowing things to end. And, this is a really great opportunity to just acknowledge the things that you are ready to let go of and leave in this year and not carry forward with you into 2026, which is a 1-year. So 2026 is all about new beginnings. And I think that's really, really powerful. I know I've really seen this reflected in my life and a lot of other people's lives at the moment. So what are you ready to let go of and leave and kind of let end in 2025 and not carry into next year? And then what would you actually like to bring forward into 2026? Can you think of anything from this year, the good things, the things that you've been grateful for, the shifts, the lessons? What do you want to take with you into 2026? So you can absolutely do this workshop based solely on business, but I think what most of us end up doing is kind of like pulling a bit of our life into this as well. So we've reflected on 2025, we've kind of closed out the year. If you want to just take a moment, I know we're not physically out of 2025, I'm guessing most people are doing this in December, but it can be really good just to take a moment and just be like, just let this year go. Just let this year go. You might feel emotional. I feel slightly emotional thinking about it, actually, in terms of just letting 2025 be now. It's, it might feel quite overwhelming, it might feel quite emotional, but we've thought about 2025, we've done what we need to do to think about 2025. If there's anything else that comes up for you that you want to journal out about this year, anything else that needs to be recognised in order to move forward, then this is the point to do it. So go through that process now, and we're going to move on to the actual planning for 2026. So as we get ready for 2026, what does your version of success look like? This is one of my favourite questions to ask myself and to ask anyone really, because what it helps us do is remember that success, as we often see it portrayed on social media, in kind of like popular culture or whatever, is not necessarily what is going to mean success for us. And it's really about tuning in and kind of setting the bar, if you like, or, kind of really being clear on, actually, this is what I'm working towards. This is my bigger picture of what success means to me. It doesn't have to mean, the typical 6-figure or 7-figure, as it tends to be now, business. It can mean something completely different for you. So I think getting really clear on that at the start kind of sets the scene for what you might want to progress in 2026, so that you're not working on things that are ultimately not going to bring you closer to the version of success that you want. So what is your version of success? So the next question is a bit of a values check-in. So if you've done some values work before and you already know what your values are, then it's a great opportunity to reflect on those, see if they're still relevant, if they're still good for you, if you want to change them. I use Danielle Laporte's desire map. That's really informed the values that I've got. And, the desire map and core desired feelings are really saying that behind every goal, ultimately what we're seeking is a feeling underneath that. So that can be a really great, different way to look at it. It's slightly different from the traditional values. Also, I'm in a program called To Be Magnetic, and the version that they have of values is your authentic code. So whatever version of values work that you might have done, if you haven't done anything around values work, I would absolutely recommend that you do that. But really think about what are the values that I have in my life and business that I want to reflect on right now, that I want to just remind myself of as we start to plan 2026, because this needs to be the foundation for all the steps that we're going to take now. And then thinking about your version of success, and you might actually want to come back to this question a bit later on, it's totally up to you, but do you want to have a word of the year? Do you want to have a word for 2026? My word for 2025 was adventure, and I think that I've mostly kind of achieved that. I think probably one of the first years in a while where having a word of the year is actually like being reflective of where I've been. But would it be helpful for you to have a word for 2026? And what would that be? And like I say, you might want to work through some of the other questions and then come back and find a word that better reflects that. But what would your word for the year be? And if you are doing this, I would really love for you, especially on YouTube, please comment in the box below. Let me know what your word for the year is. I'd absolutely be so delighted. And if you're listening on the podcast, pop me a DM on Instagram at wholeheartedlylaura and tell me what your word for the year is. I love to hear other people's word for the year. So yeah, that's that question. Think about your word for the year and what it would actually look like to embody that and live that as well. Like some examples would be amazing around this too, rather than just picking a word and not really being sure what it looks like. But, what are examples of you embodying and living this word in 2026 look like too? And now we're going to move into some intention setting for 2026. So if you think about that big version of success that you have, if you think about your values, if you think about the word for the year, the kind of like what you want to embody, what would some key specific intentions be that bring you closer to all of these things? So it might be that you already have an idea about what your business goals might want to be in terms of getting closer to that version of success. Maybe it's an income goal. We're going to get into breaking all this down in a second. But do you have any specific intentions for 2026 that you want to get down now for us to refine as we go through? And then again, specifically for your business, if it's helpful, it can be useful to break those intentions or goals down into one of 4 areas. And those 4 areas are income, alignment, impact, and growth. So your income goal is fairly, like self-explanatory, but you might also have goals around your expenses in there as well. Like any kind of financial goals, you might want to have them in that section. Your impact goals is about how many people you want to reach, how many people you might want to work with. It's all about the impact that you and your business are creating in the world. So get that noted down. Your alignment might be actually like what would feel really good to me in terms of like some shifts that I can make in my business so that my life feels more in alignment. It can be, am I going to start and take Thursday afternoons off every week so that I can go and do something that I really love to do? Anything like that, you can list those goals and intentions under that section. And then under the growth section, this is where you might be thinking about, well, actually, I want to grow my email list to, 3,000 people. I want to grow my Instagram following, or I want to get YouTube. One of my goals for YouTube was to hit 1,000 subscribers in 2025, and I have done that. So I've achieved that goal. So it's goals like that. So if you are struggling to think about any goals and intentions, especially for your business, breaking them down in this way can be really, really useful. And what I would tend to say to people is it can be a really, really good idea to make sure that you've got a goal in the growth section, because if we're not setting ourselves intentions and goals around the growth, then our business is going to struggle. So it can be really, really good to think about what would be a growth goal in amongst this. But otherwise, feel free to use each section as you wish and make it work for you. And then under each intention or goal, I want you to start thinking about what actions you would need to take in order to reach that goal. So if you have a goal to make, 50k in 2026 in income, what would you need to do in order to achieve that goal? And again, this is where we start to kind of like some of the goals might mix in together. Like your growth goal is probably going to be quite closely correlated with your income goal as well. So some of the actions might actually apply to both, but really think about what actions would I need to take to achieve that goal. If you have an alignment goal, and again, maybe it's about, actually, I want to be able to, stop working at 3 p.m. every day. What would you need to do in order for that to happen? Is it about better time management? Is it about communicating boundaries with people? Is it about, changing the settings on your Calendly links so that people can only book in up to 3 o'clock? What needs to happen in order for that to take place, in order to achieve that goal? And if you can break it down, sometimes it's useful to break these goals and intentions down with milestones as well. So for example, the 50k income goal or the 100k income goal, can you set yourself milestones at every 20k, for example? Whatever makes it tangible, whatever breaks it down, whatever actions you need to take, because this is really about being clear on, if you have a goal or intention that you want to reach, there's an action that needs to take place in order to achieve that. So it's really thinking about what those are, so that you actually have a plan and you have steps that need to happen in order to reach it. Now, you might have quite a lot of different ideas for actions that you could take here that are going to help you achieve those goals and intentions. But now I want you to really think about, out of all of those different ideas that you might have listed down, which ones are the most fun? Which are the most enjoyable? Which ones will help you embody some of your values in the process of doing those actions? And actually really refine the actions down that you've got, because it's very, very easy to come up with a massive list of actions that you need to take, but you don't necessarily have to do all of them. And sometimes you can choose the ones that actually make the most sense to you. So if you have a growth goal and it's around increasing your following, for example, on Instagram, there's a couple of different ways that you could do that. An action that you could take is post more reels. Another action that you could take is pay for ads. And one of those might feel more aligned and more fun than the other. So you can really start to feel this out and get a sense of, what is going to be the best actions for me to take. If you are looking at your goals though and thinking, I've got no idea what actions I need to take in order to reach that goal, then I will say that is a really great opportunity to look at whether or not you need some support in your business to work with a coach or mentor like myself to help you know what actions are going to help you achieve those goals. And then once you've got your actions all put together, you might want to think about all of these actions under, again, 4 different headings. So those different headings are services and offers, marketing and visibility, organisational, and anything else. And what this really helps you do is see where you might be a bit heavy on the actions and less heavy on the actions in different areas of your business. You don't have to do this step if you don't want to, but I find it really helpful because if you don't have a lot of action taken, particularly in the marketing and visibility section, which is what tends to happen for us highly sensitive and heart-centered coaches. And this is really, I've included this question as a bit of a check and balance because, again, for those of us who are heart-centered and highly sensitive, we might just be like, I'm just going to not think about the marketing and visibility so much. I'm going to just think about the services and offers. I'm going to create a new course. I'm going to create this and this. And I'm going to tidy up this. But we need to make sure that we're taking some action in this area. So this is a bit of an opportunity to just check that you've got some actions going on and that it's balanced across those areas of your business. The next question is all about sales and really thinking about any sales cycles that you want to implement in your business in 2026. Now, I've got a full course that includes talking about what sales cycles are called the Launch and Sales Fix. I will put a link in the description. That was on sale last week. I'll pop a link in the description so you can go and check that out. And I've also got an episode of the show where I talk about this. I will also link to that. But sales cycles is basically, what are you going to sell and when? Essentially. So you might want to look at the whole of the year. For me, what this looks like is that in March, I will be opening the doors to Wholehearted Business and doing a launch. In September, I'll be opening the doors to Wholehearted Business and doing a launch. I will tend to be doing something around about kind of like usually like the May time. And then I often launch something that runs over the summer. But that tends to be my pattern for things that I'm kind of actively selling. Again, this is all covered in the Launch and Sales Fix. So really think about any particular times when you want to be pushing the sales, any sales cycles you want to move through, any periods of more active selling. Get all of that listed out now. And then the next section of the workbook is all about mapping out your time and looking at the year and what you've got going on and actually assigning some timescales to things. So there's different ways you can do this, and I'll give you some examples in the workbook. We've got quarterly, so you might want to plan out what's going to happen each quarter. So you might be like, right, the actions that I've got there, so those things need to happen in quarter 1 and quarter 2. What you'll tend to find is that the closer you get to the back end of the year, the less actions you have, and that's quite normal. So don't worry if you feel that you're kind of front stacking the year a little bit. We've also got the option in the workbook to also break down your year in mini seasons. I've got a whole episode of the show where I talk about how I chunk down my year into these kind of 6 to 8 week blocks, very roughly based on the wheel of the year. Really, in reality, what it's based on for me is the school terms, because I'm a mum, and that really highly has a massive impact on how everything shows up in my life. So you can look at that section and use that as well if you want. You know, some people love doing it in quarters. I personally like slightly shorter sections, and again, the wheel of the year really helps me tap into what is going on in nature as well, and I love that approach. So the link to that episode of the show is actually in the workbook as well, but I'll also link to it in the show notes too, so do go and check that out if you want to use that approach as well. And finally, you can just break all these down into months and actually just have, you know, this is what's going to happen in January, February, March, April, and so on. So that's totally fine as well. And then the next section is all about charting your success. This is about how we're going to measure the success that you're going to create in 2026. So the first section is all about metrics. How are you going to measure that you are shifting things and that you're achieving your goals? What do you need to be measuring that is going to give you feedback on your kind of steps towards those intentions? So if we set milestones, and when we're looking at some of those goals and intentions, this is where you might want to have numbers against things and how you're going to track them. If you've got growth intentions as well, you might want to be tracking certain metrics in line with that too. And again, even for like the alignment ones, you know, if it's about having more joy in your life, if it's about having more time and freedom, like think about how you might want to check in with that. Is there any way that you might want to measure that, even if it's just doing a personal check-in every month? Really think about, how am I going to measure that I am working towards these things? It's really, really helpful when it comes to identifying where things aren't being progressed, and knowing that at the end of 2026, you're going to be looking back and thinking, I have achieved the things that I wanted to achieve. And again, the next question is all about milestones. So do you want to actually include any specific milestones where you've kind of chunked down some of the bigger intentions into more achievable little kind of wins, like small wins, you know, medium wins? It's a great way to help make a big goal a lot easier to get to if you have those milestones. So do you need to have any milestones attached to any of your specific intentions? The next question is about, how are you going to grow your community or audience this year? I specifically have this question in there because it is really, really important that you are having some actions, taking some action in your coaching business that is going to help you do that is going to help you with the growth of your community or audience. Because if you're not growing your community or audience, your business may become stagnant. So it can be really, really useful to make sure that you are identifying some actions that are going to help you reach that, because without that, you might get stuck. And then the next section is all about being supported in 2026. How can you yourself, as the most important thing in your business, you the coach, how can you be supported in 2026? The first question is, who do you need to be in your business to reach and embody those intentions? Is there an identity shift that needs to happen? You know, this can be such an interesting question, because if you're setting new goals, new targets for yourself, new intentions, often it's really interesting to look at the identity that you need to embody or take on that is going to achieve that. Now, to take it completely out of the context of business, you know, if you, let's say that you had the intention of, you know, running a half marathon next year, then the identity that you would want to embody, that you would want to adopt for yourself, that you would want to embed for yourself would be that of a runner, of someone who gets up and runs 3 times a week or whatever it would be. So the same as for your business, you know, if you have a specific goal or intention, what identity needs to be embedded for you, or what identity shift needs to happen? Who do you need to be in order to reach those goals? The next section is all about, how do you work best? Do you need any new boundaries or working practices to support that? So for example, you might work best in the morning. Do you need to just have like no clients, nothing going on? Do you need to tell everybody, you know, tell your partner, tell your kids or whatever, that the first 2 hours of the day between 9 and 11, they are your like most active work hours or whatever? Like really think about, when do you tend to be the most productive? What tends to feel the best for you? Like for me, I really like to have long expanses of time to be able to like really get into certain tasks. So I always try and have my clients on Tuesdays and Wednesdays if I can. That is flexible. But again, maybe for me, I need to actually reinforce that boundary with myself a little bit going into next year, because that's slid a little bit. So it's really thinking about, how do you work best? You know, do you need to go and work in a coffee shop? I work really, really well in coffee shops, and it's something I haven't done recently. So I really need to get back on that and really find the sections of my day when I can go and do that and when that's going to work. So really think about, what do you need to work best? What do you need to put in place to be able to facilitate that? Then the next question is, do you have any people on your wish list who you want to work with or collaborate with next year? So this is a really great one. Like if you have a coach that you want to work with, like myself, maybe, like there's a coach that I've had on my wish list for a while and kind of just waiting for the right opportunity to work with her. So do you have anyone that you want to work with? And again, for collaborations, are there any other coaches that you would love to collaborate with? So really think about anyone, any relationships that you want to build, anything like that you want to work on or put in place or reach out to people, then that's to list out in this question. And then the next question is to think about some fun rewards that you would give yourself when you reach certain milestones or goals. Now, funnily enough, as I say this question, I realise that I did this and I've done none of this year. So this is a good wake-up call for me to make sure that next year I do not slack on this one. But what kind of little rewards? And it could be as easy as like an afternoon bath. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be, taking yourself out for a coffee and not working. It could be, spending time, doing something that you love without any guilt. It could be having a couple of hours just to read something. It can be really little rewards. It can be buying yourself some new jewellery. It can be buying yourself a new handbag. It can be much bigger if you want. But what kind of rewards do you want to have in place for as you hit some of the milestones and intentions that you set? The reason why this is really good is because it reinforces that feeling of achievement. It kind of builds all that positive, mental energy, all of those neural pathways when we give ourselves these little rewards as we hit these things, because otherwise it's really easy to not stop and pause and recognize our success. It's really, really easy to do that, just to not kind of just sit with it and kind of feel that before moving on to the next thing. So it can be really, really good to actually just stop, give yourself something, little reward in recognition of what you've achieved. And also remember to reward effort, not just the actual achievement. So this is another really, really good thing to recognize. If you've put your all into a launch, and even if the launch didn't go the way that you wanted, give yourself a little reward. Recognize the effort that you've put in as well as the actual achievement of things, because effort is what is going to get you the places that you want to get to. The results are kind of secondary to that. So really think about how you can reward the effort as well as the hitting the milestones and the intentions too. And then the final space is for you to basically journal out or list out or do anything that you want to do here about 2026. This is just your open space, anything that we haven't covered that you want to cover, anything that needs to be said, anything that needs to be envisaged, anything like that. This is your section to just put it all out there. Anything else that you want to have put on paper for 2026, this is your opportunity to do that now. Something that you might want to do right now as well is you might want to sit quietly for a few minutes and just visualize yourself kind of sitting in this spot right now, and this is really funny because for me, I was literally kind of was I in this exact spot? But talking about this last year, and you might want to really do that fast forward thing, really see yourself at the end of 2026 and kind of feel the way that you want to feel then. What will you have achieved? Visualize how you might look, how you might feel, the things that you're going to be reflecting on in the reflection section for 2026. Like just do a little visualization, just pause me, put some nice chill music on, sit in, close your eyes for 10 minutes and just allow yourself to visualize where it is that you want to get to at the end, how it's going to feel. I think that's such a powerful way to manifest, is to really get into the feeling of how you're going to feel at the end of 2026, having achieved the things that you want to achieve. Really sit with that. It's a wonderful, wonderful exercise to do. You might also want to write a letter to yourself as well. So you might want to write a letter as if you are already at the end of 2026 and you're writing a letter to say how grateful you are for all the things that you've achieved. You can also do a voice note. It's one of my favourite things to do, is to sit down and just I use Voxer often, and I will just do a voice note to myself. And I'll be like, I am so grateful that I have reached this financial goal. I am so grateful of all the clients that I've worked with this year. I'm so, so grateful for, how vibrant and healthy I feel in my body. I'm so grateful for the wonderful home that I've got. I'm so grateful for my healthy children. Really think about and also try and state it in the now as if it's already happened rather than for it to happen. And that can be a really powerful exercise too. And there we have it, everyone. There is your 2026 planning workshop. I really hope this has been helpful. Again, a quick reminder, go and check out the planning templates for coaches if you want to be able to take what you've just written down here and put it into a system. So I use Notion. It might sound a bit scary, it might be a bit overwhelming, but it is a fantastic system, and I do break it down in the training, so please do go and check that out if you want that extra support. It's a really, really affordable offer. It's like $19. Go and check it out, because those templates will help you take a lot of what we've looked at today and kind of put it into a place, a hub online that you can come back to. Otherwise, if you have notepads, however, if you do it physically, if you like writing things down, do that. Whatever it is that you need to do, have that put in place and have your plan somewhere where you will reflect on it and use it. So I literally go through my plan and use my plan every time I sit down for a new mini season. I will look back at my, in this case, the 2025 plan, and I will look at the things that I had down as intentions and really think, am I progressing towards this? Where am I not progressing? Where do I need to do things differently? Like, all of that reflection is really, really helpful. So don't let this plan just kind of sit there and not do anything. Try and think about how can you make this part of your everyday business tasks, or even not every day, but every month, every season, business tasks to check back in on this. It is really, really helpful. So there we go, guys. I really hope that's been so useful. I'd love to get any feedback. Again, do share your word of the year with me too. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave me a comment below. Let me know what your word of the year is. Let me know if this has been helpful. If you are listening on the podcast, please pop me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Wholeheartedly Laura. I would love to know how you've got on with this. And I will see you next week, guys. Take care. Bye.